Hi, I'm Lowell Gentry. I'm a research scientist in the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Sciences here at the University of Illinois. And I'm working with cover crops, and we're looking at cereal rye, and we're trying to get cereal rye into corn and soybean rotations, trying to use it as a catch crop to remove nitrate from the soil before it gets into the tile, especially during the non-growing season. My talk today is how much cereal rye is needed to decrease tile nitrate concentrations. Tile drainage is very important to us here in central Illinois, and it's created very valuable farmland. I think of tile drainage as a prerequisite for high yields. Unfortunately, tile drainage has a side effect, and that's that it carries nitrate with it. So we're losing nitrate from our fields, and it's getting into our streams and rivers and being exported out of the state, ultimately to the Gulf of Mexico. And if we look at tile drainage by county across the Mississippi River Basin, you can see here that in Illinois and Iowa and across Indiana and Ohio, those are the areas or the counties that have the highest percent of land tile drained. And it's these same counties, but this is looking at a watershed level. So it's these same areas that are heavily tile drained that export the most nitrate out of their watersheds. And these dark blue watersheds are losing between 15 and 25 pounds of nitrate nitrogen per acre per year. So what can we do about tile nitrate? Well, first of all, we need to use the appropriate amount of N for corn. And that means we should use the MRTN, the maximum return to nitrogen, based on your area in the state and the price of corn and fertilizer. Secondly, timing of fertilizer and application is important. And so the closer that we can apply to when the crop needs it, the less likely we'll lose nitrate in our tile. And then lastly here, we think cover crops can greatly help us maintain yields but reduce our nitrate loss. Here's a list of the benefits of cover cropping. I think the first one on the list is still the most important. Winter cover crops or overwintering cover crops are very important for holding the soil in place. We're getting heavier and heavier thunderstorms, it seems, in the spring, and it's nice to have the soil covered up. But cover crops are going to add carbon, meaning organic matter. That organic matter is going to feed microbes. That's going to hopefully increase nutrient cycling and make nutrients more available. Cereal rye is well known to suppress weeds, but we're looking at it as a nitrogen catch crop. Can we grab the nitrate that could be lost during the growing season and hold it in the cover crop, and hopefully that cover crop will release it to the next crop in the following year. Now, there are risks of cover cropping. I think the number one risk is the delay of planting of our row crop. If we cannot terminate our cover crop when we want to, then we may not be able to plant when we want to. Also, cover crops could keep the soil a little cooler by making a mat across the soil. Maybe that would slow down germination. Maybe that would slow down crop growth early. Also, if the cover crop took up a lot of N, well, that means there's probably less N available to the next crop. That's probably not as big of a problem when we're following cereal rye with soybean, because they can fix their own N. There's also allelochemicals. Now, that's not a bad thing for suppressing weeds, but we're worried that it may have an effect on our row crop species, namely corn. But generally it's the small seeds that are inhibited. So small weed seeds are inhibited from germinating. We don't think we have much of a problem with that on corn and soybean because it's a big seed. And then we worry about disease, creating a green bridge from the cover crop to the row crop. Here's a photograph that demonstrates the ability of cereal rye to suppress weeds. We had some disc openers plug on us, and we didn't get some cereal rye planted in a couple of swaths here, and we sure got a nice assortment of weeds to emerge where we didn't have any cereal rye. If we've got a good stand of cereal rye, you can see that there's very few weeds. Where we don't have cereal rye, we've got mare's tail, foxtail, water hemp, for example. So if we can suppress weeds with cereal rye, maybe we can cut back on one herbicide application, and that could offset some of the cost of cover cropping. The first time we ever tried cereal rye after corn was the winter of 2015-2016, and this is a corn-soybean rotation. We planted cereal rye in September. In fact, we flew it on into standing corn, and when we harvested the corn, then it grew, and then it grew well in the spring. It does look a little end deficient in this picture, but we terminated it May 6th and planted soybean about a week later. This is a pretty good amount of biomass. This is 1 1/4 tons of above ground biomass per acre. But like I said, it's a little end deficient, and it's only got 32 pounds of nitrogen per acre in it. But this amount of cereal rye greatly reduced tile nitrate concentrations. I'm going to show you that on the next slide. But I want to tell you that we got very good soybean yields, and there was no difference between soybean grown after cereal rye or without cereal rye. We got 80 bushels per acre across all our plots that year. Excellent yields. So we're at this farm. We have this replicated tile drainage study. We're actually looking at 36 tiles being monitored on the same farm, and these just happen to be the 3 tiles that had the cereal rye planted after corn. And you can see that that there's a steady decrease in concentration for each one of the individual plots. And we reduced the concentration, the starting concentration when the tile first started to flow, about in half. And when we looked at the load, meaning the concentration times flow, we saw that the tile nitrate loads were reduced by more than 40% compared to the plots without cereal rye. And that's pretty close to the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy goal of reducing nitrate by 45% as far as being exported out of the state. So we're very pleased to see that this was proof of concept that this overwintering cover crop could act as a catch crop and reduce tile nitrate concentrations. So how much cereal rye biomass is enough to affect tile nitrate? Well, this picture is showing what I think is the bare minimum. This is a 1/2 ton per acre of above ground biomass. This is cereal rye planted after corn, and it was going to be no-till soybean after this. This is about 6 to 8 inches tall. The stems are. The canopy would be a little taller, but you're looking for about a 6 to 8 inch stem. And with this kind of overall production and density, you can see that it's not really thick. It was broadcast or aerially seeded out of an airplane. So it's pretty good biomass, and this didn't have any effect on soybean, but we do worry about any more than this in front of corn. But I'll talk about that later. And you'd want to terminate it at least 2 weeks before you plant corn as well. But in front of soybean, you have much more flexibility. In fact, 2 years in a row now, we haven't been able to terminate cereal rye when we wanted to, but this was ahead of soybeans, so we weren't too concerned, and so we let it grow, and we planted green. This was sprayed the next day with Roundup. But this is about 3 to 4 foot tall, and it was heading out already. And this amount of biomass is 2.7 tons per acre. And this greatly reduced tile nitrate concentrations out of this field. This field was down to 1 part per million nitrate. That's really low. So again, this is plenty of cereal rye biomass to reduce the tile nitrate concentration. And I think we would do better if we had a roller crimper on this planter, or some type of rollers that can be added to a planter and smash this stuff down and make a mat. Because the soybean had to come up sort of through this trellis of dead cereal rye. It's a little hard to even see the soybean as it's coming up. Here's a close-up. But it still yielded well. We got 75 bushel per acre, even though we had all that cereal rye biomass. So great production level and very low tile nitrate loss. But in front of corn, it's another matter. And so we did another study on a different farm, and I can just start right by going to this picture and saying this is too much cereal rye ahead of corn. This caused us to have a yield hit. But let me go back and explain the experiment a little bit. We tried to terminate the cereal rye 4 weeks before planting, 2 weeks before planting, and then the day before planting, just to stress the situation. And I would never recommend that you plant corn green into cereal rye, but we're pushing the envelope here, and we wanted to have an effect. And so as you can see, the T3, which was the April 13th termination, and then we planted April 14th, had 1.4 tons per acre of biomass, and that did significantly reduce corn yields from 235 bushel per acre, no cover, to 222. That's a 6% decrease in yield. Now, we don't have a significant decrease with the earlier terminations, but I don't really like the trend. The T2 was right about a half a ton per acre biomass, and I have a picture of what that looks like. Now, I say this is averaged over N management treatments. It's because we were trying 3 different N managements. We were having half the N put on in the fall, just to see if that benefited the cereal rye, and then we would put all of it on, all of the nitrogen on in the spring pre-plant, or we would put 50 on at planting and the remainder as an early side dress. And we found it was best to front load the N. So it was best to have all the N on in the spring. The fall N didn't do as well. And I think it's because the cereal rye took up too much of it and didn't give it back in time. I'm not trying to go into that much detail here. I think the main point is looking at termination date and biomass when it comes to handling cereal rye in front of corn. Now, the next year, it was a very cold April in 2018, and we did not get nearly the biomass that we produced in 2017. In fact, our T3 here in this photograph, we only got to 0.31 tons per acre. And here's what's left of T2, when it was only 0.17 tons per acre. So with such a small cover crop, it didn't matter when we terminated. Now, we weren't able to do every 2 weeks because the farmer was getting anxious to plant corn, which you can understand that. So we had a 2-week interval and only a 1-week interval. But again, it didn't matter when we terminated it, meaning we could have terminated on May 1 and planted on May 2nd and not had a yield hit. and that's because there was so little cover crop. Well, that's also not enough cover crop to reduce the tile nitrate concentration. So it looks like there's a magic number in there for corn production and following cereal rye, is that you need at least a half a ton per acre to affect the tile nitrate or reduce the tile nitrate, but more than a half a ton per acre in front of corn may give you a yield hit. So clearly there's more risk involved growing cereal rye in front of corn. Well, here's another picture. This was the T2 before we sprayed it, and again, it's about 6 to 8 inches tall if you look at the stem elongation. Now, yes, the leaves extend on above that, and they might be 10 to 12 inches tall, but you're looking for a stem that's about 6 to 8 inches long, and that with a decent stand, and you'll have a half a ton of biomass per acre, and that's all you would want in front of corn, and that's if you killed it at least 2 weeks early. Now, strip till tears out some rows of cereal rye, and so that does reduce the cereal rye biomass. But this is a picture that represents a half a ton per acre of above ground biomass with strip till, and this was terminated 2 weeks before this picture was taken, and corn was planted the very next day, and this did not give us a yield hit. We got the same yield as no cover. So in conclusion, cereal rye biomass accumulation of a half a ton per acre is sufficient to significantly reduce tile nitrate concentrations. Again, we're looking for stems that are 6 to 8 inches tall. We recommend terminating cereal rye at least 2 weeks ahead of corn planting. There is a balance between cover crop biomass production and the potential for the cover crop to decrease plant available N, which can lead to delays in early corn growth and ultimately can result in lower corn yields. So my take-home message is that cereal rye ahead of corn is riskier than ahead of soybean. Soybean gives us much more flexibility. Cereal rye ahead of soybean, you can let it grow. More biomass means more weed control and less tile nitrate. But cereal rye ahead of corn, you got to kill it when it reaches a half a ton per acre. But if it was a cold spring, it doesn't really matter when you killed the cover crop or when you planted corn, because there's just not enough biomass to interfere. But then again, that wasn't enough biomass to reduce the tile nitrate load either. So overall, we are optimistic, and we believe this is promising research that shows that we can grow cereal rye in front of soybean and not have a yield hit, and we can let it grow longer than we can in front of corn, and we can greatly reduce tile nitrate concentrations and loads. And we saw a greater than 40% decrease in tile nitrate load the first time we tried it. So if you'd like any more information, feel free to contact me. Here's my phone number and my email. I thank you for your attention.